War Room the Hockey Podcast is back with you. Thanks everybody for tuning back in with us. We're back on Zoom again. We will be, as far as I know, we will be on Zoom for the foreseeable future, won't we?
Yes, sir.
With current logistics and travel situations and all that stuff. So a lot more content that we can now post to YouTube, put our faces on YouTube, videos on YouTube, which will allow us another avenue to push out our podcast. But no in-studio work, at least for the two of us. If we have our favorite goaltender in one day or something like that, he might be able to sit in with me in studio. But in terms of you and me, no studio work for at least a little while. So
not for now. Never know, though. You never know.
The beauty of Zoom. So we are on, I believe this is episode 103, is it? 103?
Sounds right.
103, 104. It's one of those two. Everything kind of blends together a little bit with everything. But the third or fourth episode in the 100s for everybody here. So we're in the Hockey Podcast. What's that?
Before we get lost in content, I've been meaning, ever since Christmas, I've been meaning to give a shout out to maybe the best Christmas gift of the season, which is the Testacuzzi. Have you seen it? Did you see the pictures of it?
He sent me a photo of it, and it's one of those things where it's clever, and clearly it's a good idea because they're making money off of it. But it's also one of those ideas that makes you wonder how they're making money off of it, given that why doesn't anybody just sit in an actual jacuzzi and it accomplishes that right there? Why does it need, and how does it, one thing I don't know about it is how does it balance? So do you have to sit in a power squat position for however long you want to use it? Or can you actually sit down without it tipping and dumping water out? Like what's the balance of it? That's my...
So many questions. Many questions. I encourage everybody to go online. If you didn't get a Testacuzzi for Christmas, there are Father's Days and birthdays, Valentine's Day coming up. Put it on your list. Check it out. It is a little bit of genius, and I would go so far as to say that in a day and age where everybody wants to talk of eco-friendly and saving the planet and green and all that crap, here's a product that does not require, to answer your question, why don't you just go sit in a jacuzzi or in the bathtub? Because it takes a lot of hot water to do that. And the Testacuzzi operates on maybe half a cup of water.
All right. I'll give you that. And I'll give you this, which makes my only argument would be the balance.
Yep.
I would want to sit there on the couch without water dumping out all over the fabric or to the one, all over the fabric. And yes, it's just water, but two, because then it's a use, how do you use it? Because the water's all dumped out. So as long as it can balance in a way that you can sit comfortably and not do a power stance for 20 minutes, then I'm on board. But I have yet to see it in use, and I sure as hell am not going to watch somebody use it. So
no, I don't want to see it, and please don't send us videos. If you're using your Testacuzzi at home, we'll figure it out for ourselves. But we also, everybody's got to have their own, because I don't believe that's something that you want to share. I know there's a lot of things that get shared in the dressing room. I don't know that Testacuzzi would be one of them.
Yep.
Anyway.
Before we jump into content, though, as we transition here to the episode, before we jump in, make sure everybody has headed to the necessary social media platforms, audio platforms, and video platform, and like and follow us there. War Room the Hockey Podcast, at War Room the Hockey Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, respectively. War Room the Hockey Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio, as well as YouTube. So make sure you head there, subscribe, follow along, engage with us. We'd love to hear from you, and enjoy. This is episode 103 or 104 of War Room the Hockey Podcast. This week we are going to cover some standards, some league standards, some standards of officiating, some different standards like that. both good and bad. Cover some standards where cover some things where the league and officials are missing the mark, as well as where they have hit the mark or exceeded it, just for the sake of remaining objective. So standards this week. But before we get into the nitty gritty and the meat of that, there are a few headlines throughout the hockey world to cover. I do want to give attention, because we haven't, through COVID and through shortened seasons and whatever else, we haven't really put a lot of attention on NCAA hockey and junior hockey, respectfully, due to different testing policies with World Junior or with shortened seasons or different things like that. We just haven't given them enough attention. So as we head into the national tournament season here for the NCAA, give a quick note to where they stand. Again, remember, for the national tournament, 6 automatic bids. So you get conference tournaments before you get the national tournament. The winners of those conference tournaments get an automatic bid to the tournament. After that, it's all selection process. So there's 6 or 7 conferences, including the independent, which has more teams this year than usual, just because of travel and all that stuff. Alaska isn't considered an independent school this year. Robert Morris, quick note for them, their program got shut down. Robert Morris said they wanted to focus more on academics rather than sports. There was a movement to bring the team back. They are coming back for the 23 season. So
they are.
Robert Morris will be back for the 23 season,
Okay.
which is good news for the Atlantic Hockey Conference, and for that school and those young men and young women, because Robert Morris also has a women's team.
Of course.
So Denver tops the NCHC. Denver and North Dakota top the NCHC.
Shocker.
UMass Lowell, so not Massachusetts where Cale Makar came from, but UMass Lowell tops the Hockey East. Quinnipiac atop the ECAC. Minnesota State. Minnesota State has been the school to beat for the past 3 or 4 years. They are running away with the #1 ranking in all of NCAA hockey, but they topped CCHA, which is the new division there, the new conference there. Ohio State tops it over Michigan, believe it or not, in Big Ten, and American International in the Atlantic. So
I have 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
One statistical, one opinion. Statistically, I wonder how many teams have ever won a national championship from outside of the automatic bids, and from what position? Like, how often do you get a 10 seed or an 8 or a 12 or something like that actually comes up winning the tournament? And subjectively, how is it that Michigan has even ever lost a game with the talent that they have on that team? What are they doing wrong? They're not contenders, and every year they've got a whole carload of first round draft picks on that team, and they never challenge. What is going on?
This year should be interesting. This year they should. They're gonna slip a little over the next few weeks with Kent Johnson, Owen Power, and these kids over in the Olympics.
Yeah, no doubt.
But with everybody healthy, and with hopefully the hockey world, not just the NHL, changing their BS testing policies here after the Olympics, it should allow players to be available on a more regular basis. So hopefully, in that regard, Michigan should be one of your top favorites, along with Minnesota State, and then your regulars like Minnesota Duluth and Denver and all that stuff. But we'll see how it shakes out. They've been there for years. I mean, you remember the years of TJ Hensick and moving on to JT Compher and guys like that, and then now with Kent Johnson and Owen Power and all them. But to your point, they've just never been able to really pull it out since then. But we'll see. This may be their year to push, especially because they're likely, because I haven't heard any news around it, they are likely to lose Owen Power. They're likely to lose Kent Johnson. and a
I would say.
number of their players after this season. So this may be their year to kind of push for it before the recruitment process starts again and kind of rebuilding back. So we'll see how it shakes out. But we're getting down to the home stretch for NCAA. BCHL has about 160 games left on their schedule before we see their playoffs. They're
Sorry,
going from.
I meant to ask also.
Yep.
The Savoy kid at Denver is really, really lighting it up. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. He's. I'd have to look up the statistics here, look up the stats for Denver. But they are.
You were on to BCHL, which is great. I happened to think of that because I heard some talk of him a few days ago and the tear that he's been on.
Yeah. Here, while I'm thinking of it, let me pull it up here. But yes, I was talking about the BCHL. They have, I want to say 65 games left in their season before their playoffs. And we talk about it every time. Poor Merritt. They've played 36 games. Take a guess at what poor Merritt's record is. Just without cheating it, just take a guess.
Oh, I haven't looked since early in the season, but they were winless last time I checked. I'm going to say they played 36 games. Did you say?
36 total games, yeah.
36 total games. Have they won less than double figures?
Oh, you're right in that prediction, but they are so far below double figures. They're 2-32.
Oh,
with some overtime losses and shootout losses mixed in there, but they're 2-32.
No, they are
2 wins. 2.
Oh, it's so sad. You know, I feel bad for the kids. I feel bad for the coaching staff. I believe they are community owned.
Yep.
Which is great. The community got behind them, bought the franchise to keep them in Merritt. And if you've ever been to Merritt, you know why it was important to keep them there. And I don't mean any disrespect. It's just one of those little towns that needs its BCHL presence. Wow, I don't like to see that for anybody. It's not good for the game when teams go that bad. And this is a pretty steady theme for them.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Langley's playing well. They're first place in the Coastal Division in the BCHL. There's some surprises now. Langley first place, Salmon Arm first place, Couch and Valley last place. So interesting times. We didn't get to experience a BCHL showcase this year.
No, and
not a lot of real meaningful input we can put on certain players or anything like that this year. But
if we get a chance, we're going to do that again, depending on if travel restrictions are a thing of the past. That was a really good time.
Question for you regarding BCHL. Do you think now that they are BCHL alone, they aren't part of the entirety of Canada in the CJHL? It's just BCHL. Do you see either them splitting into more than 2 divisions or potentially adding more teams?
It would be at the price tag.
It's hard. It's kind of a loaded question because we both kind of know the answer, especially with junior hockey. But it's a curious question to ask, because BCHL is far and away the league, with exception of the Brooks Bandits.
Right.
They are the teams in the league in junior A hockey. Being BCHL alone now to where they won't even participate in a national tournament like before with the other leagues. It's just BCHL. Do they split from 2 divisions? Do they add more teams? So
I don't see them adding teams. Cranbrook was an automatic. because the building was there, the fan base is there. And when the ice moved to Winnipeg, that became an automatic. I don't see that happening again. You might see, depending on travel, you might see some changes, some location changes, but the price tag is so high to get into junior hockey, and the return is often it's a dash number. So
Yeah.
it's going to be tough to add. But
Speculation question here, and this is more speculation, so we can transition and move on. But speculation question then: do you when and whether it's tomorrow or it's 20 years from now, COVID stuff will stop? It's just
yes,
the law of averages. It will.
yeah.
As a result, the border will open up. Do we see the BCHL opening and potentially down the road? And again, cost is a big factor, but for simple speculation, adding a few more American teams.
You know, if the border is open, there is plenty of there are places around northwestern Washington, in addition to Wenatchee, which is kind of a locational anomaly. There are places around Bellingham and a lot of areas there in Northwest Washington that would be a good choice if the border is easily passable. Yes, I could see that.
WHL transition here.
Yes, sir.
Well, first, Carter Savoy. I do want to touch on his stats here.
Yeah.
He's played 24 games with Denver, 16 goals, 17 assists.
Real deal.
So he's one of, if not the leading scorer for Denver. So he's the real deal, at least at the NCAA level. We'll see. Again, we'll see how it transitions and how it blends, and whether or not he's reached his peak at the university level or he's ready to go at the NHL level. Because we saw the same statistics from kids like Nick and Drew Shore, players like that Quentin Shore.
Yep.
Hasn't seen the light of day anywhere.
No, it's very, very surprising knowing what we knew of that.
We'll see how he transitions once he's done it with Denver. But so far he's lighting it up. WHL, Winnipeg Ice in first place. How about that?
Yeah, nice.
Transition from a year or two ago where they're at the scraping the bottom of the barrel and everything, and now they're right up there with Edmonton at the top. Well,
look, the WHL junior hockey is no different than any other level. It's how you draft, and it's a draft and develop league. And boy, oh boy, did they drafted well and they developed well. Very.
Yep.
So good for them, and that's a great move. Putting them in Winnipeg was a great move. Getting out of Cranbrook was important. The change had to happen, and good for them. Gee, Christmas, that's a great market for junior hockey. That's for sure. And I hope they do well there.
Yep. Everett topped the standings for the Western Conference, and okay, since I last checked, Edmonton's pulled away a little bit, but Edmonton, Winnipeg, they're at the top in the East.
Edmonton just
along with Red Deer. So
yeah, and good for them. That's another franchise that went through a few doldrums, but man, Edmonton seems to put it together every year. And here again, you're drafting in the bottom of the round of every round, and they just don't take a year off. That's something to be proud of there for ownership, management, coaching staff.
And a shout out to the Swift Current Broncos, who are not in last place. How many of the past few years has Swift Current just been the Merritt Centennials of the WHL? Just struggle city, and they are Medicine Hat has taken over that position, at least for this year. So only 9 wins for Medicine Hat this year.
Teesh. That's, it's such a good tradition, though. I mean, they've been there a long time. The Broncos used to be in Lethbridge, moved to Swift, been there forever, developed a ton of players, Great franchise history. Just, boy, it's tough. It takes a lot to dig your way out of having an empty talent pool. And I don't mean to insult any of the guys, but when your talent pool is not up to where it needs to be and your pipeline isn't, then that is a really, really difficult turnaround, because in junior hockey, as you know, you've only got a kid for a couple of years. Maximum you've got somebody for usually 3 years. But
Yep.
boy, tough going.
Another transition here. Quick news and note: Pat Verbeek hired in Anaheim as a general
That's a
manager.
great hire. That is a
good hire
great
there.
hire.
Several Canadian teams have broached the subject of moving their home games if Canada can't figure out the restrictions and mandates.
Yeah.
Per an article with Bettman has said that there have been no official real discussions around it, but the idea has been brought up. Nothing's been worked out. No logistics of it has been determined, but the idea of it has been brought up by several of the Canadian teams.
Yeah. Well,
and rightfully so.
We talked about it last time, I believe. $2.5 to $3 million per home night, per home game is the revenue from concessions, parking, ticket sales, etc. And when you have almost none of that, yes, you got ticket sales, because as we know, season ticket holders, for instance, I just was playing golf last week with a guy that I know really well from Toronto, season ticket holder forever. They cancel and postpone, and they keep his money. So at least the ticket sales revenue is still there. The suite sales revenue are there, but all of your ancillary revenues like parking and concessions and merchandise are not, except for what people buy online. So
there's a home ice factor to it too.
Oh, sure.
They cross the border and they walk into buildings, no matter where one of the American teams is in the standings, they're walking into a building that is packed to the rafters with people shoulder to shoulder screaming and loud and the energy. And then you walk into Montreal and there's nobody. You walk into Toronto and there's 25%. You walk into Vancouver and it's 50. There's no energy to it. And I at the beginning of this, when I remember at the start when we got the bubble in Edmonton that first year of the COVID stuff.
Right.
I remember thinking, well, fans and energy is important, but really the on ice stuff is what really drives it. And a part of me still that, but there's a big factor into what you can do on the ice, having the energy behind you.
Oh, but there's no question. Look how much.
I'm not saying Montreal is a Stanley Cup contender if fans are allowed in the building, but there's a passion and an energy to it that they then bring to their opponents because of it, and it's just not there.
You bring up a good point. But I would say that this year, the Montreal Canadiens have to thank God that there are no fans in the building this year. Imagine, the backlash is bad enough in the community when you've fallen on tough times like this. Boy, nothing worse than being, giving up a shorthanded goal and getting your power play booed off the ice. They're probably, most nights they're lucky there's nobody there.
Yep, agreed. Finally, and we won't carry on too much about it. We've done 2 episodes devoted to it, but thoughts here on the continued and new controversy in Chicago surrounding Rocky Wirtz and his comments, and now in the aftermath, it's been reported 3 new allegations have come against Aldrich and the organization.
There were reasons to believe that a lot of people knew about what was going on. Exactly who knew, exactly when they knew, and what they knew, we may never know. That may never come to light. But I would say that Rocky Wirtz has been an exemplary owner, and yes, the buck stops at the top, but to continually stepping on him. Obviously, lessons been learned. They've generally cleaned house. They cleaned house for people that were not even any longer there. So enough is enough. At some point, you got to look forward and let the legal process take over. And why, you know, I,
I
I get
agree.
it. You don't sweep it under the rug.
Contextually, I agree with some of the things that Rocky said. Optically, the way he said it did not look good.
Look, I
How
applaud.
defensive he got, how dismissive he was, how all this stuff. You could have addressed it while also saying it's time to move forward. And so optically, the way he did it did not shine a good light.
No, and look at the situation now. Not granted, he was in an extremely difficult, maybe unwinnable situation. Was it his fault? Again, matter of opinion, maybe. Did he deserve to be there? A matter of opinion. If you are the owner, or you're the GM, or you're somebody higher up somewhere, even Gary Bettman's office, you don't want, in a sensitive situation like what they've had in Chicago, very publicly humiliated bunch of people and franchise in general, at least temporarily. But you don't want to see him come out and read a prepared statement. You don't want to see him either issue a prepared statement through a PR representative. You want to see him take that on himself. But when you put somebody in front of a camera and a microphone who is not normally there, bad things can happen. And he may have had the very best of intentions. I've always had a lot of respect for Rocky Wirtz, but boy, you're right. It did not come out in his favor, even though he tried to face it head on, which I admire, tried to do all the right things as an owner should. But if you're not used to thinking on your feet with a camera stuck in front of you, really, really bad things can happen. And most of the time you have to expect it.
Well, good for him for being there at that town hall meeting, whatever it was, and good for him for doing that. Optically, too, what the frustrating part about watching it was how defensive he got given the situation. This is the first time that anybody's had an opportunity to speak with anybody higher up in the Blackhawks organization about what's been going on. If you are not ready to address it, then maybe you shouldn't step out in public.
Right.
So to get defensive about a reporter asking, or poking or doing anything like that, fine. If you've been at the forefront answering questions and dealing with it from the beginning, now it's time to now it's like, guys, look, I can only share so much because of the legal process. I've already answered this question, this or that's been solved, whatever else, time to move forward. But when this town hall meeting is the first time in all this that anybody high up in that organization has showed their face, you have to expect that people are going to want to ask the higher ups about the situation because again, it goes top down. So
Evan, you know the justice system. You know that before a witness goes on trial, they go through a mock cross-examination
where both sides ask.
So much at stake. Why not put Rocky Wirtz in front of a room full of people that were trying to shoot flaming arrows at him? Why not put him through that? Why not take, and this extends to players as well, why not take young players, take them out, beat the snot right out of them at practice, have the veterans beat them up, exhaust them, bag skate them, ruin them, and then have them go immediately off the ice and face a camera and a room full of people that are trying to skewer them. Get them used to the idea. It looked as though Rocky Wirtz had no idea what was coming. He had no clue how to prepare. That's the problem. It wasn't likely that he was going to say or do the wrong thing. He doesn't have any malice of intention. He was unprepared. Get the guy prepared. He's the owner of $1 billion franchise. Spend a couple of hours doing a mock press conference. It's ridiculous.
No matter who's to blame for the lack of preparation there, at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to something as simple as, if you're not prepared to deal with those questions, then don't put yourself in a position you're going to have to deal with it. Because no owner, no manager has come out and faced this Kyle Beach situation up to this point. That's the first time an owner or anybody high up in that organization showed their face in any type of forum that allowed people to ask questions. So rightfully, any inquisitive, curious mind is going to want to ask top down, rots from the head type of situation, is going to want to ask the owner about all this and how he's dealt with it and what he's doing and all this stuff. And Rocky himself either failed to prepare in lacking the common sense to know that might come or something. But if you're not willing and ready to face it, then don't put yourself in a position to have to face it. Otherwise, don't get defensive.
Right. Don't go out there
and organization more than anybody else because you're the owner. So if you're not ready to face it, then don't go out and face it, but don't get defensive when you do.
No, absolutely right. Yep.
Enough of those. That's a lot of headlines, quick hits there. Transitioning. This week, War Room the Hockey Podcast, episode 103 or 104. Forgive me for not knowing.
For not being prepared?
Not being prepared. I shouldn't be here facing it if I'm not prepared. Episode 103 or 104. This week we're going to touch here on standards. And I thought of the topic for this episode watching the Bruins Avalanche game and watching the hit that put Nathan MacKinnon out. First of all, I want to get your take on that play before we dive into anything regarding the penalty called, the lack of this or whatever that. Your take on that play and how you viewed it.
The one thing, you know me, I am a referee advocate. I'm an on-ice official advocate. I think they have a horribly difficult, thankless job. I think they do spectacular things for the game and for the players. Just staying out of harm's way and not interrupting the play or getting themselves killed is one thing. But to do what they do in that environment, I absolutely salute it. For the one thing that I see happening with them, and it's because they err on the side of caution, is I see them often getting sold by a player who feels a stick up around his collar or something, throws his head back and sells a high sticking penalty. That's because they err on caution. When Nathan MacKinnon, I don't think at real speed that the on-ice officials would have been able to see that it was his own stick.
100%.
I do think they were able to see that it was a high hit and it put him immediately down, and Nathan MacKinnon never goes down. So why the error wasn't made on the side of caution surprised me. I'm not saying they should have seen the stick, but I guess when it happened at real speed, I was just surprised that it didn't result in at least, if not a hit to the head, they would review that and see that it wasn't, but it was a high hit and it got his stick. When you are Taylor Hall, who does not have a reputation for playing dirty, ever, you got a reputation like Taylor Hall, it doesn't matter. When you target and throw a high hit, clean or not, you throw a high hit on a guy like Nathan MacKinnon, you got to expect the next thing you're going to see is Curtis McDermott over and over again.
Or Gabe Landeskog.
So if you don't want to answer the bell for running a star, don't run a star. So if you're going to do that, even if it's a clean hit, you know that clean hits, you have to stand up for yourself depending on who you're targeting. It happens every night.
So you're not a fan.
And then answer.
You're not a fan then that Hall didn't answer the bell.
No, No, if you're going to throw the hit,
he kept skating away.
give him the fight.
Yeah.
The guy asks for a fight, you give it to him.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
First of all, I don't like the cowardness of not answering the bell. Clean hit or not, you put down the other team's star player. If you're not willing to answer the bell for that, then maybe don't do it.
Right.
Clean or not. I go back, and again, Colorado example, I go back earlier this season, Colorado playing Nashville, and Ekholm ripping the helmet off of Rantanen and throwing it down the ice. And then he turns around, and here comes Landeskog.
Yeah.
If you watch the replay, you look at Ekholm's face, he's shocked and surprised that Landeskog's getting in his face. And then after Landy bloodies him, he's down on the ice looking up at the official, shocked, like, what was that? Yeah. And I'm sitting there watching, like, then what did you think was going to happen? Clean or not, you can't do those things and expect not to happen. It's like the Edmonton Montreal game when Cassian ran into the goaltender. The Montreal goaltender, do you see that? And nobody did anything.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Clipped the goaltender behind the net, and nobody touched Cassian. Nobody did anything. It's the problem with all these rules and all these things that try and get rid of fighting and get rid of these things is that part of standing up for your player, clean or not, is it brings passion. It brings energy. You're being a teammate. You're standing up for each other. You're doing these things. And the instigator rule and all these things has created a situation where nobody even attempts to touch Cassian. Right. Or now Taylor Hall thinks he doesn't have to answer the bell. I don't like that stuff. Since we're on standards, from a standard perspective, I don't like in that play, and it's unfortunate that it was McKinnon's own stick. I don't like in that play that they reduced the 5-minute penalty and or didn't toss him. The only reason I don't like that is because, like Landeskog said himself in post game, it's not that it was necessarily a dirty play, but it was the type of play per the standard that the league has set. It is the type of hit that they are trying to get rid of. A blindside high hit that they're trying to get rid of. And that's exactly what it was, McKinnon's own stick or not, that bloodied him. And they not only reduced the 5 to a 2, he not only doesn't answer the bell, Colorado's is now skewered afterwards for going after him as if he should, and there's no discipline.
So
now from a common sense perspective, the only thing that I will say should have happened was 2-minute penalty and Taylor Hall answers the bell, because from a common sense perspective, McKinnon had his head up. It was his own stick. There was nothing Tom Wilson about it.
No.
But from the standard that the league has set or is trying to set for the past 3, 4, 10 seasons, however long, that hit, whether Taylor Hall is a dirty player or not, that hit is 100% precisely the type of hit that they are trying to get rid of.
Two quick observations. First of all, I agree with you. On the ice, if you go out and whoever it is cannot get Taylor Hall to give him a fight, then the next shift, McDermott takes Pasternak and wipes him out, and take whatever penalty you want, hand it to McDermott for running him. But if Taylor Hall won't answer for himself, then I'm going to squish your guy. Yep. That's it. It's your call. Go. And when I get done on my way to the dressing room to shower up and phone New York to get my punishment, I'm going to skate by the bench and tell them that Pasternak is now in the trainer's room because Taylor Hall would not answer. That's one scenario. Then that's what should have happened. Secondly, I get it when guys are on the ice. I get how they don't see it at real speed. I get how the officials, no matter how many of the 4 of them happen to be looking may not have gotten it at real speed. And I even understand that on a little iPad with sweat running down and trying to get back into the game without delaying it too long, how you might not have it even correct on the replay. What I cannot ever find an excuse for is that the league office reviews this stuff frame by frame for hours with nobody watching them, no game at stake, no fans screaming. They watch it for hours and they get it wrong. How do you not go back to just exactly what you said? We want to get this type of hit out of the game. It doesn't matter whether you like getting the hit out of the game or if you think that hit belongs in the game. It's irrelevant. The Board of Governors voted and they want it out. If that's the case, then punish the hit. Yeah. Even if it wasn't exactly dirty. Get it right at the league level when you don't have the scrutiny of the world watching that film. Get that right. And also, culturally, the game has changed, and I have a lot of respect for Taylor Hall. He's a hard-nosed guy. He played a great junior career. I'm fine with Taylor Hall. I'm fine with all of them. But there seems to be almost no penalty when you do something, especially to a star player. You just cannot. I don't know whatever happened to the unwritten rule that if you run my guy, holy smokes, you better watch out. You'll never have a peaceful shift again as long as you live.
I think standard-wise too, there's too much of a reputation involvement. So you're seeing too much of guys like Kadri getting a harsher something because he's Kadri, and Taylor Hall gets nothing. Now I say that knowing very well that the Tom Wilson Panarin incident goes against that narrative, but yeah. There does seem to be a heavy hand in reputation having a big say in things than the play itself.
And it really shouldn't. I get it if you're a repeat offender. I get why Brad Marchand, every time he sneezed at somebody, he got another 3-game suspension. I get why some guys are constantly having problems. And I'm not saying that Kadri doesn't deserve most or all of his playoff suspensions and the problems he's created for himself. But each individual episode should be taken just that way. Now, if you've got, I don't understand how PK Subban has never served a suspension for slew footing. If you've got a guy who's a repeat offender, habitual guy, you've got to step on him. And that's the one thing with that graduated system of suspensions. That's what they put it in place for, and they get that correctly. But every single incident has to be taken on its own.
What about on ice standards from a perspective of what officials see or should see? There's been several occasions this season in multiple games with multiple teams where they've completely botched too many men calls, one of which cost the Avalanche a second point in a game against Nashville. I even on my phone have a saved screenshot of the official already having his arm up to call the penalty against Colorado, when if you look at the photo, Nashville is the one with 5 guys on the ice and Colorado has 3, right? So things like that, like how, and therefore how does that penalty go against Colorado? Like things like that. And what I mean by on ice standard is there's 8 eyeballs, on ice eyeballs that are meant to catch these things. How do you miss certain things like that?
I don't know. I can't, because I've never been an official. You were at the minor hockey level. The one thing as a coach, the one thing that I could never argue with ever, no matter how much I didn't like it, was during a whistle, if I had a chance to ask one of our guys, one of our officials, why this or why that, if he said, I didn't see it, it might have been, but I didn't see it. If he says, I didn't see it,
then why is he calling something at all?
Then what are you going to do? It's when a guy is standing right there looking at it and doesn't call it that's more frustrating. But
would you say in that position then the argument would be why call anything at all if you don't see it though?
Well,
Because if you're not
yeah,
seeing it, then what is it? Then why is your arm up?
if you don't see it, don't call it. And if you see a guy all of a sudden out of the corner of your eye, his glove flies off and he goes down, don't automatically call a high stick or a hit to the head. You don't know what happened. Whistle, huddle your guys. Did anybody see this? Help me out here. Did anyone see it? Do what umpires do. What did you see? Was it fair or foul? Ask for help. Did you see
I've
the
seen
tag? Like,
I've seen that
heck,
several times this year too, where an official something happens behind an official's back, and he glances and sees the guy down, and it's 5 or 10 seconds removed from the incident, and then his arm goes up, not because he saw anything, but because the guy's down. And it's those types of things when I talk about standards that get me fired up a little bit, because you're not, let's give credit where credit's due. These guys, there's a lot of work that goes into it. Not only do you have to be in tremendous shape in order to keep up with the speed of the game, but you also have to be able to avoid taking pucks to the crotch and
right?
getting icings to the
Getting
head
run
and
over.
things getting run over, while also keeping an eye on the play. Absolutely, it's a difficult, and as we're discussing here, and as we see in a lot of situations, thankless. So Wes McCauley and these guys, I applaud them. And despite my problems, Brad Watson, hey, you did the job.
Yeah.
From a standard perspective, though, it's hard for me. And again, I'm sitting here on a microphone. I'm not out doing it. So again, let's keep it in perspective in that regard. But
Yeah.
you've got how many cameras? You have how many eyeballs? How do you miss these things? How is the standard of the rule book and the standard that the league is setting that difficult to consistently enforce? Because you
You
see
know
a
a
lot
lot
of
about hockey.
inconsistency.
We've been to the showcase. You Every chance you get, watch at least a period or so of a game that you couldn't care less about. I always say the same thing. I've been in rinks where I have no skin in the game. I don't have a kid playing. I don't have a favorite this or team that. I don't understand what everybody's screaming about. There's nothing going wrong out here. It's fine. This game's being called straightforward, and people are throwing stuff and screaming and swearing. Shut up. It's just your home team. I go watch a game or watch a game on television and tell me how many times you would pick out a call or a non-call and say, "Oh my gosh, that's awful." It's a fraction of the number of times of when you're watching somebody you care about play.
Yep.
And I think that's why calls get influenced by a home crowd more often than they do of, you know, if that hit again on McKinnon happened in Boston, you're going to get the place is going to erupt, right? If the Taylor Hall on McKinnon hit happens in Colorado, there's going to be booing and screaming and carrying on for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Big difference in the way the same play being looked at two different ways, and the only fair way to do it is straight down the middle, which is what the officials are supposed to do, and they do every time. They get it right more often than you can imagine, with or without. In a case like this, you're making a point that the officials got it just as right as the league office. And the league office watched it for hours, over and over and over. The officials watched it for a few seconds, and they called it the same way.
Yep.
So these guys are getting it done without the benefits of all the technology. They're just doing it with their own moxie.
Yep.
And so it's difficult and it's frustrating.
Yep.
As for standards, I don't know if I just circled the question or if I fed anything to it or not.
Well, I want to be careful. I don't want to vilify, but I also don't want to just blindly applaud officials. They're, part of proper conversation is both sides of things. It's from an emotional perspective or an objective perspective. my biggest struggle is the inconsistencies with enforcing the standard, whether it's the officials or the league. It's the inconsistencies, how Jordan Greenway can blatantly run into Darcy Kemper and it's nothing.
It's not even a penalty. So yeah,
The
that was my
only
question. How
penalties
do you
the only penalties that were there was Greenway getting a 2-minute interference penalty,
right?
and which again, per the standard of things, you're going to now punish McDermott for standing up for his player.
Are we
Now
not
you're going
trying
to
to
give
get
him a
that hit out
2-minute
of the
penalty.
game?
Yeah. So how Greenway does that, and it's very clear he accidentally on purpose ran into Kemper, and there's no punishment. There's no issues. Just a 2-minute thing that is negated now because you also say, McDermott, how dare you stand up for your guy?
Yeah, exactly. It's
It's
so. Let me. I agree with that
maybe
one.
that stems from, speaking of top down, maybe that stems from the league, and it's just the officials being kind of between a rock and a hard place. Maybe.
Yeah.
But it's just, to me, it's just the inconsistencies of it, of how an official can stand there watching it. If you watch the replay, the official is watching it the entire time, and it's nothing more than a 2-minute penalty, even though per the standard, Kemper left the game with an injury.
Right.
And
Went to the quiet room.
per the standard of that the league is
Concussion protocol.
things, when injuries occur, supplementary discipline needs to take place, and yet nothing. So
Let me ask an open-ended question then, and I'm curious as to what your initial reaction is to this. Where would you draw the line at what gets reviewed? You mentioned too many men. You've mentioned the elbow to Kemper's head. You've mentioned a handful of different scenarios, and you could pick them out every night. We're now spending more time, well, not as much, but spending time reviewing offside, review goals. How much stuff do you want to see reviewed, and how much do you not? And that may be a long-term question.
It's a long-term
thought.
question with not an easy answer, because I'm not a big fan of the amount of stuff that's reviewed even now.
No,
it's overdone, and it's basically, what's the phrase? It's over policing. I don't know the phrase,
yeah.
but it's trying to make it 100% perfect rather than just letting the game be. I do think, though, that some things need to be reviewed, but it's a long-term. It's not an easy answer because ultimately you want whatever the solution is going to be what brings the most consistency.
Yeah.
So if this hit over here is deemed interference, cross-checking, high sticking, boarding, hit to the head, whatever, then this over here needs to be the same thing.
Exactly.
I don't care who the officials are. I don't care who the player is. I don't care what their reputation is. I don't care what the importance of the game is. I don't care anything like that. It needs to be consistent. And it, to the point where if you don't see it or you're unsure, you don't call it. Colorado, for example, 8 points in first place in the Central Division. They're sitting pretty good right now, but who knows with 40 games left if that thrown away point against Nashville I'm sorry, but let's be real, a horrendous call by the officials.
Yep.
Costs them anything seeding wise as a result down the stretch. So, that's I just don't like it affecting things that way.
No, but it does. And I completely 100% agree with you that consistency is all anybody wants. Either it's a penalty or it's not, but it's always the same. It's either a strike or a ball, but it's always the same. Tell me how you're calling this game, and you get a feel pretty early. Are they letting them play, or are they really trying to clamp things down with a whistle? So, and either way is fine. We just need to know I need to know what to tell my guys. We need to know what we're seeing. So consistency is number one. I get upset about things too when I see a guy get hurt or a game get blown on a bad call or whatever. I still say every time, whether it's my team or yours or somebody I don't care about, if you stick around a while, they all even out. It'll all come back to you. You may have lost 1 point in Nashville that you should have had. You may pick one up someplace else on, something batted in with a high stick that they didn't call. I don't know. But if you watch through the year, the calls are going to even out. Penalties are going to even out. Everything is going to eventually, like, the guys get it right so often, it's gonna square up. It just does. That's all. And I guess I keep trying to tell myself that so I don't go nuts, right?
I
Because
guess.
otherwise, what are you going to do?
Do you think while we're on it here, do you think officials are too worried about what everybody thinks of them? And
No.
I ask that because I see a lot of double penalties. I see a lot of I'm going to call this guy for hooking, but the guy he's supposedly hooking, I'm calling for holding.
Well,
It's those
in that
types of calls.
particular example,
It's those
I
types of
get.
calls that baffle me, because in positions it's one or the other. The guy's
I'll tell you what,
either holding the stick or the other guy's hooking him. How you get both in that situation is confusing to me.
in that particular example, I I believe that when the players, as we talk about all the time, whether it's in the face-off circle or whether it's on, in some play in regular time, when they figure out ways to cheat the system, they figure out ways to gain an advantage. When a guy in the last few years, since things have become more and more tightly called, when a guy feels the stick come up around his rib cage and get parallel to the ice, invariably his elbow goes down. They call it chicken winging, but he's going to squeeze that stick to his body in the hopes and maybe he's going to tumble over in the hopes that he draws a penalty. In my case, yes, the stick doesn't belong there, and that is a penalty. They decided that years ago. But in this particular example, I would call them both to try to get guys to stop grabbing the stick when they feel it come up, because they know they're going to get a call. But that's just me. The officials, to answer your question originally, they don't care what anybody thinks except each other. Like, they want to call the game the right way. But they also, one thing they do care about is they do not want to be seen as controlling the outcome of the game. They want to stay out of the way of that argument altogether. It's why when you're up 6-1 in the third period, you're likely to get a couple of penalties. Nobody wants to see an official call it the other way. So they don't care what anybody thinks outside of their own room, but they do care that the players decide the game and not the officials. And they really want to stay clear of that. I can tell you that 100% down the line. And as you know, I know quite a few of them pretty well. We've talked with Jay Shares and Brad Lazarowicz. They just want the players to decide the game. And I applaud that. I think that's what we all want.
Well, I agree. I applaud it too. And that comes in again to the consistency, because unfortunately, whether they've intended or not, you've seen a lot of playoffs or regular season where they have dictated the outcome of the game. The Nashville, Colorado example being one, the hand pass between San Jose, St. Louis a few years ago being another.
Yeah.
Things like that where they're making what seems like either outrageously horrible wrong calls or ticky-tack stuff at very important integral times, and having an effect on the outcome of a playoff series or in the standings and things like that. And whether they intend to or not, it's how it happens. And so I guess that's where I come from with the consistency is, all right, if you don't want that, then unless it's an egregious thing, maybe swallow the whistle, because
Exactly.
because per consistency and per just examples, and I like throwing out examples so it proves kind of what we're talking about, and it's not just spit an opinion. I've seen a lot of plays where scrums are happening and you see a third guy in and nothing happens.
Yeah.
You see a scrum between two players and a guy comes in and gives him a headlock. third guy comes in. Now it's 2-on-1, gives him a headlock, and yet nothing. So things like that
I'll
that
tell
lack
you,
the standard and consistency a little bit.
as a coach, as a player, the thing that I appreciated the most, not just the consistency, yes, but being in the right position and communication. I would much rather a guy came by the bench getting ready for a face-off, official go by and go, "Hey, you better get your boys under control. You know, I don't want to put half your team in the box, but you got to do something. You put a leash on your dogs here, or you can't do this, or don't do that, or don't keep coming to the goaltender after the whistle. Whatever the case may be, let us know that instead of just starting to haul guys off one after another. Communication, and they do it with the players, they do it with the coaches, and those are the really, really good ones. The officials that have the least amount of problems with at least the players and coaching staffs and management yelling at them and causing, doing things in pressers to cause problems. They're the guys that communicate the best. And, maybe prime example you used a bit ago, Wes is far and away the most highly respected guy out there. He communicates so well. He feels the game. He feels the tempo and the atmosphere of the game, and he communicates with everybody so well. And he's perfectly willing to come by and go, I missed that one. I know you're leaking here, but I didn't see it. Sorry. Hey, my bad, whatever. Communicate, and nobody can argue with you much. The players and the coaches and the officials, all just human, all just love the game. Hate to see it happen, but hey, stick around, it'll even out.
Well,
Is that a cop out? Because I say that all the time.
It is. You and I are advocates and supporters of officials, but it evens out, I think, is a cop out to avoid saying anything that might go against that.
Guilty.
But I'm curious, per evening out, I'm going to look it up, and I don't want all the examples to simply be about my team, but per the example used, I'm curious to look at the schedule and see when. Yeah, okay, so February 21st, Colorado's in Boston. Per evening out, do we see a Landeskog or a McDermott do the very thing that you were talking about a little bit, and either go right at Taylor Hall again, or at least start with going at Taylor Hall and then go, okay, well, fine. If you don't want to, we're going at Bergeron. We're going at Pastrnak.
Yeah. Well, I would certainly, I know this isn't 1978 anymore, but I would certainly not let a high hit on my franchise guy go. I wouldn't just say, okay, well, I tried to get him to fight, but he won't answer, so whatever. A lot will depend on whether or not that's a tie game, at what point in the game the score gets settled, but I would certainly imagine that McDermott or somebody is going to say, hey, Taylor, last chance, bud, answer the fight, give me the fight, and we'll forget the whole thing. And if you don't, I'm going to make a stain out of one of your guys. But you get frustrated with me, and this is why, because I'm still 25 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yep, I agree. It's this conversation that I wish we could talk to your official friend.
Yeah, me too.
I won't use his name, but where we could have him on and talk to get his perspective. Because at the end of the day, ours will just be either completely skewering the officials or completely bowing down and praising them. But it will always lack the NHL experience of your official friend who can come in and kind of give perspective to why this or why that. So,
well,
maybe one day when he's free and clear of any obligations, he can join us for certain conversations like that. But it's topics like this I wish he could,
Well,
just
I
to give
will
that
see him.
objective, experienced perspective.
I will ask him. I'll see him probably Friday, so I'll ask him about it, and I'll see if he would be willing to give us a statement, give us an interview, come on the podcast, whatever, just to give us some, just to answer some questions. And there's no reason not to. We're on their side, but yeah, there's things that we do that we need to understand.
Yep,
Uh,
exactly.
but anyway, yeah, I'll ask him. Remind me to do that too.
Yep, I will. Before we close things out, a couple things. Since we're on it anyway, per your team, the blue and white up
Yes.
north, are they missing any pieces to make a run? What do they need?
They're missing a piece of defensive depth. Yes, they are. And I think they're probably going to pick up a guy. I don't know that it would be somebody as pricey as Jeff Petrie, but I think along those lines, somebody with a little size, some experience, probably a right shot. Yeah, and that's probably the one piece that they need to try to figure out how to squeeze in under the cap. But it's going to have to be money out for money in. So I'm not sure how they move that around. But I'd be shocked if they don't. How about you?
Colorado, they need consistency first and foremost. So the next 8 weeks between now and the deadline will go a long way into determining whether they pick up another goaltender. Can Kemper and Francois stay healthy the next 8 weeks and be consistent the next 8 weeks? You do that, and you probably earn yourself an opportunity to be the guy heading into the playoffs.
Yep.
Any slip in that, you're probably looking at bringing in at least a stability guy to carry 3 goalies in the playoffs and at least have that safety net.
Yeah.
The other thing that they're missing is center depth. And from the perspective of center depth, they are horrendous, and they have been for a few years on faceoffs.
Yeah.
And Kadri has done wonderful.
Yep.
But Kadri can't be the one and only guy in important faceoff situations. You need multiple. And come playoff time, being unable to win a faceoff in a defensive zone draw in a tie game or up by 1 with a minute and a half left in a rowdy crowd in their building and all this stuff, and unable to win a faceoff will come back to hurt you if you're not careful, especially if you not only lack the faceoff, but you also don't have the goaltending consistency. So those 2 things. It's why I'd love to see them pick up Paul Stastny. Stastny is tremendous in defensive zone faceoffs. He's tremendous in the faceoff circle. Winnipeg is likely going to be on the outside looking in for the rest of the year. They will likely be sellers. Who knows? Likely. We'll see how it plays out. See him come back to Colorado and be that third line center and provide that stability. McKinnon with Landeskog and Rantanen, Kadri with Burakovsky and Nichushkin, and Stastny with Newhook and probably either Comfer or Kubel. Tremendous 9 forwards there, and so you need that. They've also looked center wise. They've looked at and they've looked at Thomas Hertl from San Jose. All 3 of those guys I listed, good in the faceoff circle. Can't necessarily go wrong with either.
No.
At that point, you're looking at what you have to give up for them. You're looking at cap situation, different things like that. But any one of those 3 guys, you can't go wrong in the faceoff circle with. That's the one thing. Goaltending is 50-50 on whether you get a new goaltender. That's going to be whether Kemper and Francois can prove to be consistent.
They looked to me like they stabilized right before the break. Last half dozen games before the break, they were both sharp.
They can find, if they look like they found their game, if they can keep it and if not improve on it, then as a emotional, non-objective fan, I'm confident in them. And even as an objective person, I'd say that Colorado's a force to be reckoned with. But one of them goes down with an injury or they lack consistency, then I'm going, ooh, great. Colorado can put up 8 goals in a game, but I don't trust their goaltender to stop the puck. Now you're looking at issues. So
that's all over the league, though.
yep.
You've got to hope that Freddie Anderson in Carolina, Bobrovsky in Miami. I mean, these guys, those are teams that are on top of the world, but you're only as good as your goaltender. And in the playoffs, you can't outscore those problems. Not very often.
Yep.
Now you can. But yeah, that's what makes it fun. This is going to be an interesting few weeks here leading up to the deadline.
Now a question for you. Interesting
Okay.
question. Are you watching the Olympics at all?
No.
I'm 50-50 on it from a moral, political standpoint. I don't want to. But at the same time, I'm also, you know what? No matter their individual politics, these are, and with exception of a few, if you've read any headlines who've defected and joined other countries or whatever, with exception of those in those situations, these are young men and women who devoted their lives to doing this. There's a level of support that they deserve from their fellow countrymen and women. And I would want Bennett, if he were a high-level athlete, to have the support of the people around him, despite the status of the world or anything like that.
It's not their fault.
I look at watching these skiers and snowboarders and, you know, even the female hockey players and things like that. I'm looking at it and going, you know what? I don't agree with China. I don't agree with the politics. I don't agree with the COVID stuff. But these are men and women who have devoted their entire lives. And this may be one of, if not one of a few, very rare moments that they get to do this. And so
absolutely,
who am I to not watch and applaud and cheer them on? So
I'm sure I will. If the athletes and the networks and the announcers and everybody would, if it was just athletic competition alone, it would be a different story. I don't like being lectured to.
yep.
And I don't like people using my fandom, whether I'm at a concert or a hockey game or watching something on television. I don't like people using the fact that I am a fan of what I'm watching as a chance to lecture me. So
100%.
That's why I've avoided it. I will probably tune in soon, but so far we're nearly a week into it, and I've not watched much at all. But I'm sure I will. And you're right; it's not the athlete's fault. What they do is spectacular, and it deserves our attention for sure and support.
In our household, we are split between the American feed and the Canadian feed. Which one do we watch?
Yeah.
However, we weren't split for long, I will say. The missus has enjoyed the American feed strictly from the perspective of they're more descriptive.
Good.
So the American feed, when you're watching, like last night we were watching figure skating.
Yeah.
And they went into detail about how they score it and how, the different moves and all these different things. And then a few hours earlier, we were watching the Canadian feed. Never touched it. You're left to your own devices to figure out how somebody got this score and why this or that. And it leaves you kind of wondering. So at least from that perspective, the announcers on the American feed really, really have done a good job of, from the sport perspective, of at least explaining it to people who might be watching for the first time as to why and how this has happened. So, and I know Carly has really enjoyed that. So,
well, I wish I had seen that, because in all the years, whether I was at the rink, at work, or watching on television, and all of the figure skaters that we've known in our family over the years as friends, I still don't get it. I really, really don't get it. But seeing that explained, I'm saying I wish I'd watched what you watched, because I probably could have learned a lot and not been nearly as frustrated with it. Going,
well, it now started.
They got bigger numbers than those guys.
If you watch the figure skating, they've now started in the top left corner having the scoring system there. So each move that a figure skater does, there will be the base score on the difficulty of what the base score is, and
And
the
then
score you get based on how you performed it next to it. And if it's in green, it means you've exceeded what that base score is. If it's in red, you missed the mark. And
I'll have to check that out. See, I learned something on this podcast all the time.
yes, I bring up the Olympics because the women's games are already underway.
Yeah.
Canada and the U.S. undefeated. Brianna Decker hurt for the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, I saw, and that's a shame because she's
their top
a
player.
real workhorse for that team.
So they've played well. It's very clearly, and if you talk about the growth of the game of hockey, contrary to what the narrative is in the world, the major growth that needs to happen is internationally for women. Because with exception of Finland, sometimes it's not only the U.S. and Canada alone, but the U.S. and Canada are putting touchdowns up.
I know.
It's whereas with the men,
2-team tournament.
The men, with exception of Germany and Kazakhstan, the men put on 5-3 games, 2-1 games, this and that, and the women American and Canadian women put up touchdowns against every opponent unless they're playing each other. And so the international game for women needs work in terms of the growth.
They're trying.
They're trying.
And the Olympics is a big effort for them. And, I know that there have been Canadian and U.S. women going around the world over the last 10 years trying to mentor coaches and players and things to try to develop those countries whose teams can't compete, because it is good for the game.
There's a Canadian woman who used to play McLeod.
Yeah.
Carla McLeod or whatever her name is. Forgive me for missing that. She coached Japan for a number of years. Helped them get to a point where they could qualify and be there. So you're starting to see that, which is good. You want to mentor and you want to help grow the game. If you really want to practice what you preach, then it might mean going to another country and helping their systems a little bit.
Absolutely right. 100%.
You've seen it with some men and women going to places like even Kazakhstan and helping their programs.
Yeah.
Things like that. So it's big. Part of the reason I bring up the Olympics before we end it, John Leahy wrote in.
Okay. Always good to hear from him.
He said, do you think you could give us the names of 3 players from Team USA to keep an eye on for the Olympics?
Ooh-wee.
See, that's harder. I just closed it out. I'd be curious to go back and remind myself of the date that he wrote that in, because it's harder to do that when all of a sudden now NHL players can't be there, and now there's a little bit more of a selection process in who makes the team rather than TJ Oshie making it for
yeah,
right? But curious. I'll let you start it on who the guys are to watch for that.
You've got to watch Matty Beniers. I think he's one of the most talented as far as scoring punch is concerned. Kenny Agostino had played several years in the NHL, but Matty Beniers is probably, and Matthew Knies, also spelled Knies, is a big horse of a kid and a up and coming star. He will be in the NHL before long, so keep an eye on Matthew Knies, Matty Beniers. Boy, we know Nick Shore. He played for a long time in the NHL. He could be a factor as well. He's not quite as dynamic, maybe, as Beniers.
Is it Drew Shore's there too, right, or is it just Nick?
I think it's just Nick. Drew Shore is still in Denver.
He is.
Jake, the other guy to watch, I believe, on defense is Jake Sanderson. He's an Ottawa first-round pick, and he's going to be a star as well. He and Matt Beniers and Matthew Knies are going to be stars in the NHL. Kenny Agostino was a journeyman, kind of third or fourth line guy for several years, but that experience is going to be a big help. If you want to watch good, dynamically talented young players, Sanderson, Beniers, and Nice are going to be the guys to watch. And thank you for
Brock
your
Faber.
question.
Yes, Brock Faber's there as well.
Yep, Brock Faber's a good young defenseman.
You got me curious now. I don't think Drew Shore is in Denver, is he? Drew.
He was last time. It's been probably a year ago.
In terms of playing, you mean, or
what's that?
In terms of playing, or what?
No. He's just living here in Denver.
Oh, okay.
And he was out skated with us a couple times.
Oh, okay. Yeah, his career's kind of done, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I know last time I really heard. Well, he signed I remember he signed a pro contract either with an AHL team or an ECHL team for Carolina, I believe, the most recently. But before that, he was in Europe. He was overseas.
Yeah. Did he finish up?
So in 2021, so the 2020 and 2021 season, he played in Slovakia and in the Hurricanes organization, finishing with the Chicago Wolves in the AHL.
He was in. Didn't he go to the KHL for a while?
He did. He played. First he played in what looks like, I've got his Elite Prospects page here, in what looks like Switzerland.
That's right.
And that's the same year he was in the Canucks organization. And then he went and played for ZSC Lions in Switzerland as well in 17-18 and 18-19. And then he played for Kunlun Red Star in the KHL and Dynamo Minsk in the KHL.
Gotcha.
Then his last KHL team was, gotta love Russian names, but Torpedo. Nizhny Novgorod or whatever. And then he played in Slovakia. It has it listed here as a lone player. He played in Slovakia in Dukla, and then Carolina and the Chicago Wolves, and then that's it. So he's kind of done. I grew up playing with them a little bit.
Yeah.
Never played on the same team or anything like that. But I remember skating at different tryouts and kind of skating around with them. They're good players. They just, unfortunately, speaking of Savoy, they just didn't have the ability to translate their game to the pro level in a successful. Yeah. The most successful was Nick, who found kind of a niche as a fourth line center for a little while with LA, Toronto, Winnipeg, and all that. But
I think when Nick went to LA, he played for Daryl Sutter for a while, and I think Daryl Sutter helped him prolong his career because he made a real good, solid two-way player out of him, as only Daryl Sutter can do, or some of the better coaches. And Nick did stick around for a nice long career, but it's hard to imagine. And I know Drew's just a little bit older than you, so that there's a big difference, but it's hard to imagine being on the ice with him that he did not have the talent to stick in the show. It's really humbling when you see that. And
well, it's and it's no disrespect to you guys, but 50 and older drop in, you're getting a guy who played pro hockey here.
I know.
But now, again, I say that you did teach Kyle Quincy everything he knows, but but it's the same thing. I remember skating with you guys at drop in, and Landon Smith was out there.
Yeah.
And Landon Smith played at Quinnipiac and Salmon and everything like that. And he's a skilled player.
Oh yeah.
Out there against us, but he clearly didn't have the translation for the pro game at a high level. Drew, good player, made himself a career more than I can say or anything like that.
Made a living.
Just didn't really translate to the success that I'm sure they wanted or thought they would have, maybe. But hey, good for them. So
yep, absolutely. Hey, I got some good stories brewing up for you next time.
Okay, that works.
So Hey, and
Very
thanks
touched.
to our loyal listener, Mr. Leahy, for that Olympics question. I hope we
Yes.
hope that comes out right.
Yes. We also touched on the Testacuzzi. And
I encourage all the guys listening, and if you're a female listening, a lady, please, if you're looking for that special something for the man who has everything, don't look past the Testacuzzi. It's the gift that keeps opening the whole year long.
whole year long. So the NHL season kicks back up after the break here.
Yep.
I believe tomorrow they start back up. Some
Well,
teams,
as of this recording, yeah, I don't know when you're going to drop this, but
I
they
say
start
tomorrow,
on the
as of this
7th.
recording, yeah, absolutely. But Monday, I think teams kick up again. Some don't start till as late as Thursday or Friday. But yeah, season kicks up, and then it's the stretch to the trade deadline and the playoffs. We'll
Never a dull moment.
we'll keep in mind here. We'll see if you want to join me from long distance, but we'll keep everybody up to date here. I will be beginning here in the next few weeks, getting a little training in to do the Murph Challenge this year.
Oh, nice. Good for you.
I got the patch for last year's, so
Good for you.
I'll order the 2022 stuff, which comes with a shirt and a patch, and I'll be timing myself this year to. This year, the goal is to get it done. I've attempted it in years past and not been able to finish. The goal this year is to prepare and get in, and then even if it takes all day to get it done, and then from there in the coming years, get to a point of trimming down that time to better times. But
I can't wait to hear the progress.
I'll be doing it this year. If your joints will allow and you want to join, then go for it. But I will be doing that. It's quite the workout. You're supposed to do it with a 20-pound weight vest too. So um,
I keep a 20-pound weight vest with me everywhere I go.
yeah.
So I got a big advantage. Well, listen, have a great week. Good to catch up again, and thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Keep in touch with things. 2022. There's some good movies coming out, so keep your eye out for those. And yeah, big stretch here for the playoffs and NCAA, BCHL, WHL, and the NHL. And hopefully the NHL follows through with changing their testing policies, and hopefully we can get some restrictions figured out in Canada to allow fans back in the building. Otherwise, the Canadian economy may take another hit in that regard while watching their 7 teams move south of the border to play their games the way the Blue Jays did for a while. So hopefully that figures out. 40 some games left in the season, 6 to 8 weeks to the trade deadline. So
listen, let me ask you hypothetically, if you when the Leafs win the Cup this spring, if the restrictions are still in, does that mean the parade's going to be in Buffalo, or what are we planning on here?
Tape off the parade route. Yep.
Hey man,
well, that's part of the logistics of where do they play if they move.
Yep, true.
What building do they go to? What city do they go to? Do they share a building with somebody? How do they do it? So a lot of logistics. I know per the article that I read for that, they're hoping that restrictions lift in the coming weeks and they don't have to even think about it. But
stop the madness.
But it's coming. It's coming if they don't figure it out, because the subject has been broached. So teams have asked, and they're only going to continue to ask if things don't change. So I'd figure things out if you're the people in charge of the individual provinces. If you're freaking Trudeau, I'd figure your shit out, because before you know it, your teams are moving south. Obviously not permanently, but they're moving south until you get things sorted. And if this continues, you may, and this is going to be that this is a big exaggeration here, but you may, in 5 years, if this continues, you may start to see owners start to broach the subject of relocation, just simply because why wouldn't you if we can't have fans in our building? So, and that's down the road, obviously. But you know how Bettman is with relocations and with things, so that's not an easy process. So it's much down the road, but throw it out to the listeners that it is a possibility down that road if things don't change for the better and permanently. I'm not talking restrictions lifting because, hey, the variant has calmed down. Oh, new variant, restrictions back. I'm talking permanently
I know.
end
I know.
this and learn to live with COVID. That's what we all need to do, learn to live with it and put an end to the mandates and things. If you don't do that, you may see the Toronto Maple Leafs become the
Hartford Whalers?
become the Indianapolis so and so. Like you never know. I mean, might seem crazy to some people listening that I even brought it up, but you never
No,
know.
it's not.
You
I've
never
heard a lot of that kind of talk. How many years
ever
can,
know. So
how long can people sustain these kind of losses?
yeah,
Not
exactly.
long.
So you never know. So we'll see how it goes. But for right now, the 21-22 season still going, picking back up this week for the stretch to the playoffs, and we'll see how she goes. So thanks for joining on Zoom this week. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know it's not always easy schedule wise, but appreciate it. And
Never done.
These days we'll get our favorite goaltender back on. Maybe our favorite Thunderbirds coach again. Get back on, and maybe one day here we'll get your officiating friend and whoever else. Goal here in these next 100 episodes is to start having more guests on, so it's not just you and me every.
I would like that. That would be fun. You know what? Between now and our next recording, look up how many episodes we've had, would you?
I'll pull it up right now. I got it right here. I'll look it up right now. Where are we? 103.
Okay.
See, and I said 103 first. I didn't say 104 or 103. I said 103 or 104. So technically, I was leaning in the right direction. So
we're episode number 100 and something.
Yeah. Everybody for tuning in. Again, head to the necessary social media platforms. Facebook and Instagram, War Room the Hockey Podcast, at War Room the Hockey Podcast, and like and follow us there. Engage with us like our good friend John Leahy does. We appreciate him writing in, and we'd love to hear from the rest of you. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Spotify has a lot of controversy around everything with Joe Rogan, by the way. I stand with Joe Rogan. I'm a fan of Joe Rogan. I stand with him. That's where War Room stands. That's where I stand. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, War Room the Hockey Podcast, YouTube, subscribe, rate and review, share with everybody you know, so we can continue to grow, get more opportunities, do whatever, and hit the notification bell for the YouTube videos, and we'll see you next time. So thanks for joining this week, and we'll see everybody throughout the hockey community. Cheers.
Cheers.